This Capricorn full moon is happening right near the solstice, and this is an invitation to create a strong evolutionary intention for this new season that we're entering into. My name is Bryan Colter. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, and here's my take on this major event. This solstice occurs on June 21st or the 22nd, depending on what time zone you're in, right at about 1 degree of Capricorn. And this will be right after we've entered the mid-year solstice, where the sun will have officially entered the sign of Cancer. We also have Venus and Mercury in Cancer. So we're in the Cancer season. The moon being opposite the sun, as all full moons are, being in the opposite sign of Capricorn. And Cancer and Capricorn, this axis, these are very different signs from each other, but they're opposite sides of the same coin. So I like to call it the axis of nurturing, where Cancer is classically known as the mother archetype. Capricorn would be the father archetype. So I call this the axis of nurturing. This is a time of healing. To understand how to achieve this deep healing, of course, we want to understand Capricorn, but really the headliner here is that Neptune is in its own sign of Pisces, and it's in a square aspect to the moon itself. And whenever a planet is in its own sign, it is very, very strong. But not only that, it's in the process of stationing, which means it's about to change directions, at least from our vantage point here on Earth. So stationing planets are also very strong. So really the Neptune in Pisces is the kicker here. So let's understand Capricorn. If you read about Moon in Capricorn online, usually what you'll read is, oh no, it's in detriment, it's in a bad place. And I disagree with that. There's no such thing as a bad place for the moon. The moon in astrology represents heart, soul, and emotions. And during a full moon, even if it's in the sign of Capricorn in detriment, the collective is feeling emotions stronger than normal during all full moons. But the moon represents our heart and our soul and our emotions, the core of our being. And Capricorn is the sign of integrity and hard work and duty and responsibility and accountability and labor of love and these sorts of words that are associated with this sign. So teaching our heart to follow the path of integrity doesn't seem like such a bad lesson to me. And these are ways of nurturing that we can try to achieve. So the way I like to think about this nurturing axis between Cancer and Capricorn is an evolutionary question could be, how can I work hard to heal well during this time and really during this season? As I said, this Cap full moon is happening at 1 degree of that sign. So it's really helpful if you know a little bit about your own personal chart, know where 1 degree of Cap is for you specifically. That will light up a certain area of your chart known as houses, which will connect to a certain arena of your life, which can give you some extra detail on where you might be able to work hard to heal well. And if you don't know much about your chart, you can probably find some free resources online. If you'd like to learn directly from me or even get a personal reading with me, I have those services available at bryancolter.com. You can find a link below. Me, for example, my full moon's happening in my 6th house, and there's many layers of meaning with the 6th house, but one of them is about physical well-being and just self-nurturing, taking care of my own physical body, which I admit has not been one of my strong focuses in this lifetime. And I'm actually struggling with a lot of neck pain. I even got an MRI scan, and the doctor says, give me this whole long list of stuff I need to do to heal, supplements and doing Pilates to work up my core and getting weekly massages and things like this. And I'm looking at this list, and I'm like, okay, well, this is hard. Well, that's Capricorn in the 6th house for you. It's not only does it take a monetary investment, but it also takes the most precious resource, which is time. And it requires me to leverage the Capricorn energy of responsibility and duty to my own body to upkeep the health of my body. I don't mean to center this on me, but just use me as a living example on how you can be proactively working with this event. Maybe you have 1 degree of Capricorn in your 5th house, for example. That's the house of pleasure and joy and creativity. Sometimes we have to discipline ourselves to have a good time. Capricorn, the sign of discipline in the house of joy. Or sometimes we need to stop procrastinating about a creative project that we need to do and just put our butts in the chair and burn the midnight oil. That's Capricorn in the 5th house as well. So this is how you can, interplay these symbols with your own specific chart. Now, the major game changer here is this Neptune in Pisces square the full moon. And squares are hard. They're challenging. They're a little bit more, tricky to deal with, require more effort and compromise to achieve said evolutionary intention. So therefore, the primary challenges for Neptune are many, but the one that stuck out to me right away was this idea of sensitivity. People are more sensitive during full moons, even during the Cancer season, since Cancer is the sign of emotional sensitivity. So too Pisces, the sign that Neptune's in, is a sign of emotional sensitivity. And then Neptune in Pisces is linked to psychic sensitivity. So here we have the combination through the square of emotional and psychic sensitivity at peak now, creating a perfect storm potentially. Now, how the sensitivity of this event is expressed is in a multitude of ways. But one of the primary challenges for Neptune as well is a feeling of murkiness, confusion, disillusionment. It's like, not quite understanding, feeling a bit lost or rudderless or nebulous. This can be a challenge for Neptune, especially when it's square the sun. And when you also take into consideration people's emotions and desires are at peak now, this can create a lot of muddiness in the mix, especially amongst the collective. And Neptune, because it's connected to illusory states of consciousness, can be projected into the external environment as deceit or lies. And sometimes it's not done overtly. Sometimes it's just lies that we house in our own subconsciousness based on our own perception of reality. So, Capricorn being the sign of discernment, part of wading through this time is developing a certain level of discernment about the information we hear because we recognize the murkiness is at peak, and to just be careful what you believe based on what you hear. And another classic way these sensitivities can be manifest, and this is really where I'll be spending the rest of my attention, is dark side Neptune in Pisces is because of people's heightened sensitivity, there can be this urge or attraction to just kind of check out of reality. So one of the shadow sides of Neptune in Pisces is addiction, is numbing oneself, is unhealthy and uncontrollable desires. So when I think about the Capricorn full moon interacting with Neptune through the square, the words that come to mind is it's time to sober up, Now, sober up is linked to, alcoholism or drug abuse, that sort of thing. But there's many addictions that we can sober up from. Again, Capricorn is about accountability, duty, responsibility, not playing the victim card. Let me roll up my sleeves and get down to work. Regarding what? Regarding our own unhealthy desires and addictions. So one way we can sober up and work hard to heal well is to just be honest with ourselves. Okay, well, maybe I have a vice that's grown a bit unhealthy. For me personally, in my life, it's been video games from time to time. I have a strong Neptune in my own chart, so I've been very vulnerable to just going off into fantasy worlds, whether through video games or movies or whatever. And in moderation, there's nothing really wrong with that. But there's been times in my life where it's become, a little bit too much, and it's distracted me from my own evolutionary path. So this whole archetypal complex of Capricorn, and Cancer for that matter, square the Neptune in Pisces, makes me think of esoteric Christian mysticism, actually. And they really work with the 12 labors of Hercules and that myth. And they see the 12 labors or the 12 steps that need to be followed towards the goal of self-realization. And the specific labor I want to focus on here is actually step 2. And in the myth, Hercules fights and tries to kill the Hydra of Lerna. And he goes to the marsh where the Hydra lives, and he actually goes with his best friend. He doesn't go there alone. And the Hydra is hiding in the marsh, so they got to get its attention. So they set fire to the forest around the marsh, and Hercules goes to do battle. And at first he, hits the Hydra with the club and it does nothing. And then he grabs his sharp dagger and he chops off one of the heads of the Hydra. And then what happens is 2 more heads grow out of the wound and the wound is cured. So he's really struggling with this battle. And actually, step 2 of, this labor to the mystics is seen as one of the hardest of all 12 of the steps to the self-realization. So what Hercules and his friend Iolaus does in order to kill this Hydra, this formidable beast, is Iolaus takes a hot brand and he puts it in the fire in the forest to make it a hot brand, and then he throws it over to Hercules. And then Hercules cuts off another head of the Hydra, and then with the hot brand, he cauterizes the wound so that the heads don't grow and multiply. And then one by one, he chops off the head of the Hydra until all the heads are gone. And then him and his friend bury the Hydra underground with the heads, and the beast is no more. I really love this myth and how it symbolically represents our spiritual evolution. And this step 2 resonates so much with the Cap moon square the Neptune, because the Hydra represents our desires. The many heads of the Hydra represents the many different kinds of desires we can have. The marsh where the Hydra lives represents our subconsciousness, where we store these more unhealthy desires. Hercules is the hero of the story. He represents our soul, our immortal essence, our lifelight. And Iolaus represents our guardian archangel, who is there with us every step of the way. The fire represents our mind and the power of our mind with a capital M. And the burning brands represents reason as thought forms to dissolve these habitual energies that are blocking our spiritual growth and evolution. And you can really feel that Capricorn energy there. Discernment, reason. Step 2 of the 12-step program to self-realization, which is the hardest of all the steps. You feel that in Capricorn as well. You even feel it with the difficulty to the square. And the goal is to dissolve those habit energies. And it's going to require a lot of willpower and effort and logical, reasonable thought forms to overcome our uncontrollable emotions and desires. So we can work with these events in a variety of different ways. For starters, it's helpful to recognize how these major events are affecting the collective so we can be aware about what's to come. The confusion, the deceit, the illusory states of consciousness, people being much more reactive, emotionally speaking, because it's a full moon, square the very sensitive Neptune in Pisces. It can also be helpful in our own personal life in a more, let's say, mundane way where we look to the degrees and what house it's in. It's like, okay, how can I work hard to heal well in this specific area of my life? That's a powerful way of working with it as well. And we also might be feeling some confusion within ourselves, and how we can gain discernment and clarity about how to really cut through that confusion from a higher level of consciousness. We can work with it proactively with another very Neptunian activity, which is meditation. And I did custom design a meditation for this solstice event, which is amazing to practice really throughout the entire season if you want to. And I'll put a link above to that. It's my other YouTube channel. You can find a link below as well. But then we also take this Christian mystic approach. And it's like, okay, how can I do this colossal effort of beheading the Hydra of Lerna within me? Are there any distractions? Is there any way that I'm numbing myself, whether through video games or smoking pot or eating too much or maybe even becoming a workaholic, Netflix binging? It can be so many different things. Anything pleasurable and repeatable that helps us not to think about the pain that we feel. Because if we're psychically more sensitive now, and there's so much pain and suffering in the world, we're more attuned to that pain and suffering. And the trap with Neptune and Pisces square the full moon is to just lose ourselves into some fantasy land. And instead of doing that, leveraging that reason and willpower and effort, helped by our guardian archangel, but seeking to dissolve those unhealthy habit energies in our subconsciousness. These are the core evolutionary intentions, with the goal being to raise our consciousness.